Tonight, pandemic.
This is a virus. This will spread.
The World Health Organization officially declaring the coronavirus a global pandemic.
This is literally a matter of life and death.
This as more states declare emergencies across the country. And amid the outbreak,
last night obviously was not a good night for our campaign.
A bad night for Bernie Sanders, vowing to fight on after another Biden landslide. Plus,
and the front line is basically separating this village in half.
The fight for peace, churches distributing gifts of hope in battle-ravaged Ukraine, and one of Virginia's boys in blue belts out a soulful song. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The World Health Organization officially making the call the coronavirus now a pandemic. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. That decision coming down this afternoon, the number of confirmed cases now topping 1,000.
The coronavirus roiling stocks with another sell-off. It's also affecting the road to the White House with canceled campaign rallies, even as Joe Biden expands his delegate lead.
That's right. Tonight we have team coverage. Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson and medical reporter Lori Johnson.
But we begin, though, with White House correspondent Ben Kennedy with the latest on how states are taking emergency measures, even as the Washington Post reports the National Cathedral and hundreds of churches in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia are set to close for 2 weeks. Ben?
Well, John, Jenna, we'll get to states in just a bit, but the Dow was down today. Stocks tumbled into a bear market. But back to New York, they have a containment area, and Washington State, where most of the coronavirus deaths have taken place, report double-digit nursing homes with confirmed cases. Still, the CDC only recommends tests for people who have symptoms, been in close contact with someone infected, or traveled to an affected area like China, Italy, or South Korea.
Doctor's plan is March.
The U.S. is fighting back against COVID-19 following emergency declarations in 18 states and New York ordering the nation's first containment zone.
This is literally a matter of life and death.
The Secretary of Health and Human Services says this is just the beginning.
This is a virus. This will spread. We need to take steps to slow that. Buy ourselves time.
That time will be used to ship millions of test kits and setting up testing locations to try and minimize the spread.
When people need a test, they can get a test. When the professionals need a test, when they need tests for people, they can get the test.
The president also proposing to suspend the payroll tax to boost the economy, but lawmakers say they prefer targeted measures to assist hourly workers and the travel industry. Other examples of the impact, the New York City Half Marathon canceled. Popular music festival Coachella postponed as major companies like Apple and Google encourage employees to work from home. Some universities have even canceled in-person classes as Harvard forced students to move out of the dorms and take online classes instead.
You have to start taking seriously what you can do now, that if and when the infections will come, and they will come.
In Europe, countries announced today increased government spending to stop the spread of the virus there. The White House here behind me is considering moving all Europe to restrictive travel advisory. German Chancellor Angela Merkel believes that around 60 to 70% of the German population will contract COVID-19. Now, President Trump did make a bit of an announcement. He will have a briefing or a bit of an announcement himself tonight at 8 p.m. on the coronavirus. John and Jenna, we will, of course, keep you posted on what the commander-in-chief has to say.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Ben, at the White House. And let's bring in medical reporter Lori Johnson. Lori, good to have you with us. You know, with this now a pandemic, what kind of changes do you think are in store here?
Well, frankly, Jenna, not a whole lot for the United States, because today when the World Health Organization issued that global pandemic statement, they said that it's really sort of a wake-up calls for countries that aren't doing very much. That is obviously not the United States. The WHO said that they were concerned about an alarming rate of inattention by many countries, and that countries can change the course of this pandemic. So again, sort of a wake-up calls for countries to start taking decisive action, containment action, like we're seeing so much of in the United States.
Lori, today Dr. Anthony Fauci warned Congress that the coronavirus will get worse. He also said that the outbreak is 10 times deadlier than the common flu. How should people respond to dire warnings like that in a balanced way that's both proactive but not panic-filled?
Great question. And I think the old adage that has proven true for so many years, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So we want to prepare for the worst, but in our minds have a positive attitude, a hopeful attitude, and believing really that a lot of the things that we're doing are going to make a difference and really curtail the spread of this virus, because that is exactly what we've seen in countries like China and South Korea. These containment policies really do work. And so right now we're getting a lot of instructions to try to stay away from people. We know that this virus is spread person to person. So there are all these different ideas and suggestions in closing to limit the amount of interaction we have with each other, which sounds kind of bad at first, but it's only temporary until this passes.
Yeah, it's staggering how contagious this virus seems to be. Lori, the White House Coronavirus Task Force has issued new guidelines for people over the age of 60. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, as we've been talking about for so many weeks, people who are older are at most risk of having serious complication and even death from this disease. So those people need to take special precautions, trying to avoid crowds, avoid flights, and certainly avoid cruises. But then they went a step further and started recommending people of that age stock up on things that they would need for a 2-week period, just in case they need to stay home and self-quarantine. So that's food and other supplies and medicines that they would need if they were self-quarantined. And so just the general rule for people who are at high risk is just try to stay away from people as much as you can. And again, that sounds a little bit strange. So put it this way, just stay at home. As if you don't have to go out, if you don't have to go to the movie theater and whatnot where there are crowds, stay home for a little while, because that's going to help keep you from getting it and also keeping all of us from spreading it.
Yeah. All right, Lori Johnson, medical reporter, thank you so much.
Thanks,
My pleasure.
Lori. Well, the coronavirus is also taking its toll on the campaign trail. Last night, both Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders had to cancel events in Ohio.
It ended up being a big night for Biden, who won the big prize of Michigan. The former vice president, he also won Missouri, Mississippi, and Idaho, further securing his frontrunner status.
Here with a breakdown on the latest is CBN Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail.
Well, after another Super Tuesday for Joe Biden, he now holds a commanding lead of 860 delegates compared to Bernie Sanders' 710.
Just over a week ago, many of the pundits declared that this candidacy was dead. Now we're very much alive.
Biden won 4 of the 6 states up for grabs and is in a near tie with Sanders in Washington state, where they're still tallying votes.
Last night, obviously, was not a good night for our campaign from a delegate point of view.
Sanders acknowledged he's losing the electability battle, yet remains encouraged by his support from young people and holds on to hope that he still has a shot.
Today, I say to the Democratic establishment, in order to win in the future, you need to win the voters who represent the future of our country, and you must speak to the issues of concern to them.
Shaking up both campaigns, however, is the spreading coronavirus.
We were planning a big rally in Cleveland tonight, but the governor of Ohio asked the presidential campaigns to cancel their indoor public events in Cleveland with large crowds of people. And that's what we did, due to the coronavirus.
After canceling their Tuesday night rallies, both Sanders and Biden are assessing future events on a case-by-case basis. The two face off on the debate stage Sunday night in Arizona, each trying to prove why they're the Democrats' best chance to beat Trump, but now to an empty audience.
On Sunday night, in the first one-on-one debate of this campaign, the American people will have the opportunity to see which candidate is best positioned to accomplish that goal.
Meanwhile, President Trump announced an upcoming Catholics for Trump campaign event next week in Milwaukee and is encouraging Americans to stay calm amidst rising coronavirus fears. John, Jenna.
All right, thank you, Abby. Coming up, what's next for Democrats and their two-man race in the quest for the presidential nominee? Stick around for our Faith Nation political panel after this.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
Welcome back. Joining us now for our Faith Nation political panel, Julia Manchester, political reporter for The Hill. Julia, good to have you. You know, usually you're right here with us, on the round table. Coronavirus, though, seems to be affecting everything, including you. You're self-quarantined. What happened?
Yeah, so I was at CPAC about 2 weeks ago, and earlier this week we saw a number of newsrooms, The Hill, Politico, The Washington Post, suggest and encourage reporters who covered CPAC to work from home and to maybe self-quarantine for a couple of days. I have to be working from home for a week. However, I do reach my 2-week mark on Friday. Since I was last at CPAC, CPAC has been very good about updating us on, the individual that was infected. He was not in the press filing center or the grand ballroom where I spent most of my time. So the chances of me having coronavirus are very low. I feel completely fine right now.
Yeah, okay, we're good to hear that.
Yeah,
glad to hear that.
Happy to hear you're doing well. Well, Bernie Sanders today conceded he's losing the electability debate. Does this mark the beginning of the end of his 2020 bid, Julia?
It really could. And I thought his address today was very fascinating. I thought it was interesting how he conceded that, look, I don't have the electability advantage over a candidate like Joe Biden. But he said, look, when I face Joe Biden on Sunday in Arizona, I'm going to ask a list of questions. And he listed those questions on climate change, Medicare for all, free college tuition, et cetera. And I think that was kind of a way of saying, look, Joe Biden has the lead right now. I may not be the person to come out of this going head-to-head against Donald Trump, but I want to make sure we address those issues in particular. And I actually talked to a moderate-leaning Democratic strategist earlier today who agreed with that assessment and said, it was good for Bernie to at least concede that the climb in this campaign would be uphill from now on. So I think he definitely could realize the end is near, but it wouldn't be smart for him to give up automatically because he has a very strong base of supporters, very energetic base of supporters who are counting on him to continue to push his message forward.
And speaking of that general election matchup, Joe Biden is turning his focus now to Donald Trump, as you were just saying. The Trump campaign super PAC is out with a quid pro quo Joe ad. How do you think that's all going to go down?
I think this is definitely the Trump campaign telegraphing that they believe Joe Biden will be the eventual nominee. And it's interesting because they were attacking Bernie Sanders when he was up in the polls and had the momentum a couple of weeks ago, even at CPAC, attacking him for his socialism, his identifying as a democratic socialist, and those previous comments from him about socialism. But they're definitely turning to Joe Biden and painting him as someone who's from the swamp, as President Trump likes to call it, someone who could have corrupt ties, according to President Trump, or who is, too DC-centric and out of touch with the rest of the American people. He's going to continue to hammer that Hunter Biden point home, even though he might not have all the evidence to support that. We know that this is something his supporters are very concerned about.
All right, Julia, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much. And we'll be back right after the break.
On the home front.
Thanks for joining us for CBN's On the Home Front, where we highlight what the men and women of America's military do to defend our country. CBN honors the men and women in our military with an initiative called Helping the Home Front. It partners with churches across the country to meet the needs of their military families, from repairing homes to wiping out medical bills for wounded veterans.
On the home front, Tuesday morning at 10:30.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government.
My focus has been trying to really make sure we have the future leaders we need for the bench and the bar and for society generally.
You'll learn from highly credentialed leaders who are current and former judges, distinguished scholars, and ACLJ counsel.
I'm so glad I chose Regent. The relationships here have been amazing. The faculty have been amazing. Not everybody's called to the same thing when they leave law school, but they're called by a God who has a purpose for their lives, and He is going to use that education to make a difference in the world.
Regent will prepare you to be a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer. To start your rewarding law career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July. Apply today.
Welcome back. The battle between Russia-backed fighters and Ukraine's army still rages on, and that is in spite of a ceasefire agreement signed 5 years ago.
Even as the fighting continues to ravage those living on the front lines, CBN's George Thomas traveled to the war zone to report on peace efforts in eastern Ukraine.
This is what's left of houses near the frontline town of Zolote. By midday Tuesday, February 18th, 2,300 explosions rocked the area as Ukrainian troops and Russian-backed separatist forces clashed in some of their fiercest fighting. Alexander Kornev was in his house when the first series of explosions went off.
I had just turned around and then there was a boom. I was thrown back to the steps. I was lying down for 20 minutes.
Ukraine said Russian fighters attempted to advance across the separatist line into Zolote, but were repelled.
We have a powerful army. Provocations happen. The army responded firmly.
CBN News journeyed 90 miles south from Zolote to another battle-scarred village. Numerous Ukrainian checkpoints meant we were getting close to the front lines. Traveling with us, Sergei Rakuba, who grew up in this region of Ukraine.
We're in the village of Opetna, which was a vibrant, dynamic community before the war started between Russia and Ukraine. And the front line is basically separating this village in half.
Rakuba, joined by a team from the Mennonite Brethren Church, delivered food, water, and other essentials to families and soldiers living in Opetnaya. February 2014, Russian so-called separatists launched a massive hybrid war into this part of eastern Ukraine, in essence taking a chunk of the country. 6 years later, communities like this one are a ghost town, except for a few families who have lived here for most of their lives and who vow never to leave. Once home to 700 people, only 60 now live in Opatnaya. There's been no electricity, gas, or running water for more than 5 years. The streets here lined with bullet-scarred homes, the majority of houses unlivable.
But we know that even here, God is here, and people need to know the hope of God that He brings, the salvation. And so, again, a special privilege to be able to pass out gifts, hand out food, and pray with people, and just share the love of Christ.
Rakuba and Wibi climbed the steps of a bombed-out apartment building carrying supplies.
They have no light for the last 5 years. Come on in, guys.
The 78-year-old leader. She lives in this tiny room with her son and 4 cats. No heat, no water, very little food.
But there is no place to go for me. There is nobody, I can go to. And I'm staying here, I'm just waiting. I lived here for 50 years, and I will stay here.
Pro-Russian rebels control half her village and much of eastern Ukraine, including key cities of Donetsk and Luhansk.
They still hear shooting, farther there, at least once a day, once every 2 days. They still hear shooting.
14,000 people lost their lives in this region, half since Russia and Ukraine signed an agreement to end the war 5 years ago. 30,000 have been wounded and nearly 2 million people displaced from their homes. Rakuba says it's a forgotten war, and it weighs on him.
My teenage years and youth were spent here in the towns of eastern Ukraine. I remember how difficult it was for a Christian at that time to share one's faith, and in general for the church to be of influence in Soviet society. The war over the past few years has added even more darkness.
So why don't we pray? We'll pray in Russian if you don't mind.
Rakuba, a native of Ukraine, now lives in the U.S. and heads Mission Eurasia, a Tennessee-based group training young people to transform the countries of the former Soviet Union for Jesus Christ.
Our vision at Mission Eurasia is to bring hope to society through young leaders and now bring the gospel to the next generation and to those living through difficult situations like in eastern Ukraine.
Hundreds of Mission Eurasia leaders and volunteers recently crisscrossed the war zone and countries of the former Soviet Union, delivering 120,000 Gift of Hope boxes to children. CBN News was there as dozens of youngsters met in this church basement to pack boxes.
This is so exciting to see so many young people are working on this project, and this is just one of the packing and distribution locations.
Several teams fanned out across towns and villages near the conflict zone, holding evangelistic outreaches geared to reaching young people, many hearing the gospel presentation for the very first time.
I learned Jesus can help me in many difficult moments and help me not to give up.
Each event ending with boxes of hope given to hundreds of children, each containing toys, school supplies, a Christian kids magazine called Spark, and a children's storybook Bible. Once the kids get back to their apartments, they're obviously excited about rummaging through their gifts and looking at all the various things that they got. Incidentally, the Bible, along with the Spark magazine and each shoebox, has this QR code on the back, so they can use their smartphone, scan the code, and within seconds they will have access to all the various local churches that they can get plugged into. Canada-based Share Word Global partnered with Mission Eurasia to distribute the Spark magazine and place QR codes on each box, linked to a Bible app with loads of information for kids and parents.
The Bible app includes multiple languages in different translations of the Bible, and there's over 200 languages that are in audio as well.
Rakuba says every Gift of Hope box placed in a child's hands is a chance to introduce the love of Jesus and impact families in a war zone.
The boxes symbolize the future with Christ, and when put into the hands of children, they take them home. They and their families will realize that there's hope in God, hope in Jesus.
All right, thank you. That was George Thomas reporting. Well, throughout the generations, Christians like those you just saw in George's story have ventured into dangerous zones to share the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ to those who don't know him. 5th century Ireland was known as a treacherous place for outsiders where few believers were willing to risk their lives to bring Christianity to the pagan island.
But one young man, a bishop named Patrick, heeded God's call to preach the gospel in the island, and the rest is history. CBN Films tells the true story of St. Patrick in a docudrama that hits theaters on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th and 18th for 2 nights only. Tickets are on sale now. Just go to iampatrick.com for showtimes and locations.
Coming up, the coronavirus isn't the only thing going viral these days. When we come back, an uplifting story about a soulful cop that'll bring music to your ears.
If you want to be an attorney with a passion for serving people and for excellence, Regent University needs to be high on your list.
Regent's award-winning law school doesn't just create lawyers. We create leaders, judges, prosecutors and defense lawyers, civil litigators, and leaders in government. Ready to become a purpose-driven, practice-ready lawyer? To start your rewarding career, complete the online application, submit your transcripts, and take the law school admissions test by July.
Nutrition, exercise, essential oils, weight loss, and more. It's Healthy Living with Lori Johnson.
Talk about what's in this.
Join CBN health reporter Lori Johnson to get the latest information from today's top health experts.
This is fantastic.
Find out what you need to know to live a healthier life. Watch Healthy Living, Tuesday night at 9:30.
Superbook fans, here's something else you'll love. It's the new Superbook Bible app. It's packed with games, activities, and Superbook episodes that you can watch for free. Oh no! There's trivia, a fun daily devotional, and answers to your Bible questions. Plus, an easy-to-understand Bible the whole family will enjoy. You can even create your own Superbook character. Ta-da! Whoa!
Millsburg Falls man.
Come. Sorry, pardon me. Sorry, excuse me. Ouch!
Are you getting this?
Earn super points to win daily prizes too, and so much more. Time to get back to my adventures. See you soon. It's the new Superbook Bible app. Free downloads on iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon.
And finally tonight, when he's not protecting the public or mentoring students, Mervyn Mayo is ministering to himself and others through the power of music.
The police officer in Virginia went viral for singing a soulful rendition of gospel music artist Marvin Sapp's The Best of Me.
He only sees me for who I am. He's all the best.
Woo! Mayo has been with the Richmond Police Department since 2005. He also referees and sings at Police Athletic League events.
I know we don't have time for it, but he's also a worship leader, and I'm grateful to hear that because he's so good.
Yeah, he's great.
Have a great night.